Hey developers, today we're going to look at Tailwind CSS. We're going to take a look at adding Tailwind CSS to a Vue.js project. We're going to get that set up, and then we're going to look at some of the utility classes that Tailwind CSS offers. So let's begin. Hey, and if you don't know, my name is Eric. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also a big fan of Vue.js, Angular, React, and if you guys like these type of videos, make sure you click that subscribe button. Okay, so Tailwind CSS, it describes itself as a utility-first CSS framework for rapidly building custom designs. And you can even see right here, they have this little custom, this little snippet of code right here, and they're creating a card. And if you have been watching my previous videos, I mentioned that a lot of these other material design frameworks, these Vue UI component frameworks, a lot of them offer some sort of utility classes. And I always say, if you really want the best utility class library out there, then I would look at Tailwind CSS. Now, this isn't the same thing as a Vue UI component library, so you're not going to see ways of creating just adding in one bit of piece of code to add in a whole card. No, this is adding a bunch of utility classes, which is pretty neat. So we're going to get into that, and I'll show you how that works. You can see right here, this is a little example of some of the code that you'll be looking at when you install Tailwind CSS. So I went ahead and created a brand new project. This is a Vue app. There's nothing in it. I just typed in Vue, create, and then I typed in Vue Tailwind YouTube Live. And then I just chose the default options, and it created. So to get started, we're going to follow the documentation. So if you look at the documentation, there's the installation. So it's easy as doing an npm Tailwind CSS. So we'll go ahead and install it there. All right, cool. It's installed. So we do need to do a little bit of configuration to get this working as well. As you can see here, it mentions adding in this Tailwind base components and utilities. So what we can do is in our sources assets folder, I'm going to create a new folder called CSS. And then inside that folder, I'm going to create a new file called Tailwind CSS. And I'm just going to paste it in. By the way, my linter gives me a little bit of an error. There is a way you can fix this. I saw a Stack Overflow article about it, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Basically, we're going to use this Tailwind CSS. And then in my app view, actually in my main view, I can then import it in, import assets, CSS, Tailwind, CSS. So I just want to make sure we import it in as soon as the app loads. However, we need to do a few other things. Since we are installing Tailwind CSS, we need to add a config file. So as I mentioned here, you can do npx tailwind init. So make sure you do that in the root directory of your project. So let me make this a little bit bigger. Let me hide this. npx tailwind init. Now you can actually do init -- full, which I'll show you guys later, which shows you every single option in Tailwind, but I'm just going to do the default, the Tailwind init. And you can see here, it created the Tailwind config.js file. So that's this one right here. And you can see this is where we can extend the functionality. We can add our own classes that hook into the Tailwind CSS system. We can also override things. We can add plugins. If you don't know, Tailwind has a whole ecosystem. There's actually Awesome. I found this GitHub repository called Awesome Tailwind CSS that lists a bunch of the plugins out there. So it adds things like transformations, and you can even add grid and elevation and a bunch of things that's not in the default Tailwind universe, which is really neat. And you also have this variance, which I'm not going to get into today because you can change basically the way Tailwind works. So there's also the Tailwind CLI, which you can kind of take Tailwind for a spin by if you had some of these classes that you wanted to use, you can put it in your normal CSS file, then run the Tailwind CLI, and you can output some CSS that would work in your project. What we really need to do, though, to get this fully working is we need to use PostCSS, and that's what Vue is using. under the covers. So to do that, we will need to create a new file called PostCSS config.js. So let's do that. So we're going to click new file, and we're going to call it PostCSS config.js. And I'm just going to copy and paste this from the official documentation. Delete this, save it. And what this will do is it'll make sure that as we're running the development environment, and when we build, that it includes the Tailwind CSS libraries correctly inside our app. Now, one thing to also keep in mind is that, if you look at the official documentation, there's a whole video section, and Adam Wathan actually does a few examples in Vue, so I'll make sure to include that in the link in the description below. But if you are running this in production, you'll notice that Tailwind CSS, if you just run it, it'll add every single class. And those classes, you probably don't want them all. You only want the ones that you're using. And there's a really cool plugin called Purge CSS. So if you look in the official documentation, I think it's controlling file size. You can see here, Tailwind original size 785, gzipped, it's 78 kilobytes, which is a little bit bigger, quite a bit bigger than Bootstrap and Bulma and some of the other ones. However, you can remove a bunch of unused CSS pretty easily using Purge CSS. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quickly before we jump in. So we want to run this command. We're going to run this command, and this will go ahead and install the PostCSS plugin. Cool. So now it says to add this in here. So we can just copy this file, this function in here. And all this is just kind of setup. If I can paste it right. And it says use all the paths. So HTML, I don't have any JSX files, so I suppose I could delete that. And then inside your module exports, you can add in this process.env.node. And what this does is it means it'll only run if you're running it for, let's see, paste it there. There we go. This will only run if you're running it for production. So that way, if you're running in development mode, it doesn't try to do this because this will be some extra post-processing that we don't need. Cool. So what this is saying is you definitely have to have, if nothing else, you always have to have this required Tailwind CSS and auto prefixer just so that it works. But if you want to go above and beyond and actually reduce the size of your CSS bundle after it's built, then you want to install this PostCSS Purge CSS. I just think that's a quick tip if you guys don't know about it. Also, another real quick tip, I'm using this extension called Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. I would highly, highly, highly recommend installing this if you're using Visual Studio Code. It adds this nice little drop down with all the different CSS classes that Tailwind offers. Otherwise, you're literally not going to know what they all are off the top of your head. I mean, you get used to it really quickly, but I would use this because it just makes things so much easier. Cool. So I think we have this all set up now. We have our PostCSS config file, which we have to have. We have our Tailwind config file, which just defaults nothing. We have our CSS file, which it recommends in the official documentation to add this Tailwind base components and utilities. And then we also have it importing in our main file. So since we have it all running, let's see if it works. So I'm going to npm run serve, and that is going to go ahead and start the server. And I'm going to see if I see any errors. And that's what I always do. So I'm localhost 8080. Cool. Came up. And good. So I'm going to create... I'm going to go and just delete out some of the starting cruft that always appears. I'm going to make this really small. So here's the two routes, home and about, and then it opens up the router view. And if we look at the routes, we know that the home is the component home. So if we look at the home component, it's showing the Vue logo and the Hello World component, which we don't care about because we're not going to use it. But we are going to start doing this. we're going to put stuff in here. Okay, now we have an empty page except the home and about, which let's go back to the app view. And for right now, we'll just comment this out because we don't care about it. If we go back, okay, we have a big empty blank page. Perfect. So first thing we want to do is let's see if we can change the background of this. And you can see it does come up with some default styles. I'm just going to delete them all because I don't care about any of them. Oops, I found a bug. I actually had the PostCSS config file in the source folder, and it should be in the root folder. So if I move this down. Okay, so we have a blank screen here. So let's see if everything's working. I can add some classes to this. So if I do class, you can see here now I can add backgrounds if I wanted to. So let's see what I do a background, I don't know, 900. If I save it, I don't see anything, but maybe because I don't have any width or height. So I'm going to do W, that's for width. And you can see here on the right-hand side, it tells me what it's doing. So W full is width 100%. And then I can do height. I don't know. Let's see if we want it for the full screen, which is 100 VH. Cool. So now we have a big black background, which obviously we wouldn't want, but maybe we want, I don't know, a little off gray, a little 200 there. Makes it a little different. Okay, so now we have our background, but let's go and look at our home component. We don't have anything in here right now. We just have this class home, which doesn't have anything in it. So let's say we wanted to make, let's play around with this. Let's make a title here. So we'll do H1, welcome. Okay, there's a big welcome. It's in the top left-hand corner, but obviously, well, let's do this. We can, in the app view, we can add margins and things like this. So if we didn't want everything to be like in the top left-hand corner, we can, let's add some padding. So if we do P dash, you can see you have this P0, 64. These are different. This is 16 rem. So this is basically adding 16 rem, padding 16 rem. So if I do something like this, now our welcome is all the way down here. Obviously that's a lot. I don't know, maybe we'd do, I don't know, maybe P, let's see here, P dash 12? Let's see here, 12. Oh yeah, it's a little bit over to the left. Well, for now, that's fine. We just kind of wanted to move it away from the top left-hand corner. So I'm going to go back to the home. Let's see what else we can do here. So let's say we wanted to use flex. Well, first, let's make this a little bit bigger. We're going to add a class to this. And we have text, and we have all these text options. We can make it text white, text black. There's text large. I think there's extra large. Let's do text large. What does that do? All right, made it a little bit bigger. I think there's even more text sizes than that. Let's see here. We got text black. So you can do red, yellow, green, teal, indigo, purple. Here it is. So we have XL, 2XL, 5XL. Let's see, what does 5XL look like? Okay, so now it's big and right here. It's pretty big. Let's say I wanted to justify it, content, display center, do all the flex things that we want. So I can make a flex here. I don't know. I want to, I believe it's justify content. So I can do justify center. Okay, so now it's in the middle of the screen. It's pretty good. And let's say I wanted to create a div now. And I'm gonna have an image in this div. And since I sort of like to use any kind of placeholder sites out there, I think, let me see if, I think Unsplash would work here. So let me remember the URL. It's https source.unsplash.com/random. And then under there, we'll have I don't know, some image text. So we'll have, I don't know, H5, some image information, and I don't know, maybe a paragraph of lorem ipsum text. Let's see here, 20. Let's see, lorem 20. Let's see, 20. I think always forget the hotkeys for this. Lorem, that's fine. So we got some lorem text. Okay, so now it's a big old picture here with some lorem text at the bottom, which is obviously kind of crazy here. So first, I don't want it to be justified centered. I want it to actually wrap. So there is flex wrap. So now we have the text at the top. You can see here this is sort of not lined up correctly. So I'd want to add in an items. I believe it's item center. That's the same as line item center. So that's a little reason. So let's give it a let's try to make this a little bit more manageable. So I'm gonna add a class to the image, and I'm gonna put a height of, I don't know, 64. See what happens there. Okay, so now it's, you can see here, the image height is 64. So let's add a width to it too. Let's do a width of 64. Okay, I see what I did here. So I also need to add in a class here of flex, and we'll add the same thing. We'll do justify, well, we'll do flex. Instead of flex wrap, I want to do flex. I believe it's flex column, flex col. Okay, so now it's showing up as a column, and I want to item center this. And now, since this is in a column and the items are centered, we have this welcome at the top. But this right here in this div, we have this flex, but we want flex column instead. Cool. And now we want to add in the item center. Cool. So now we have the name, and then we have this div right here with some information in it. So we want to set, I want to do this. I want to set the background of this to gray, I don't know, 400. You can see now I have this box around it, and I'm going to set a height, and let's say a height of, I don't know, I can do 10. That's really small. Let's do height of 24 maybe? Still pretty small. Let's leave the height alone. Let's change the width to 1/3. Okay, I think that looks better now. So now we have this 1/3 of this image here, this card that I'm creating, and it has the welcome at the top, the card in here. Let's add some padding to it. So I'll just do padding, I don't know, 610. Let's see what padding 10 looks like. Okay, so now we have this padding 10 around it. We can also kind of mess around with the image. Let's say we wanted to have this be fully rounded. So we're going to come back here, and we can add rounded, and we can do full. And now it's a complete circle. You can see here, it's a complete circle. If I refresh it, it'll put a new one in there. And you can see here, I have very sharp corners on this card. So let's change the card border radius for it. So to do that, I can come back up here and add in rounded, but I don't want it completely circular, but I can do rounded. I don't know, let's try large. You can also do it just different edges. Let's do rounded large here. Cool, so now we have a little nicer rounded edges, and then to make a pop, I can actually add a shadow to it too. So I can do shadow, I don't know, let's do large. Okay, now you can see it pops off the screen a little bit. I want to pop it a little bit more. So instead of doing shadow large, I can do shadow, I don't know, extra large. Okay, that's a little bit more. You can see it's popping out a little bit more from the page as the circular information. Now this text looks not so great. So let's say here we wanted to make some of this text look a little different. I don't know. Let's just add text small for now. If you wanted it, make it small. That's a little smaller. Let's make it bold. I believe we can make it font semi-bold. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, now it's a little bit bolder. I don't know, the small is probably not right. How about, let's see, we can make it, I think it's 2XL. Let's see what 2XL looks like. Okay, now it kind of pops a little bit more. And then this paragraph right here, I can make it maybe de-emphasize it a little bit. First, I want to align text, align, I think it's text center. Yeah, let's see if we center the text. Yeah, now it's all centered in the middle. Maybe I want to add a little margin top to the top, margin top of 4. And by the way, I am kind of stealing some inspiration from Adam Wathan's video when he did something similar and created a card. Yeah, okay, so now we have a little bit more padding at the top, or margin at the top, which looks real good. We can also, maybe we want different color on this, so let's say we want this lorem ipsum here. I'm gonna put this in a span, and now I want to put in this one. I'm gonna make this text color, text. Let's see here. Let's say I want to make it teal, so it stands out a little bit more. So you can't even see it at all because it's really light on a kind of dark background. But let's say we pump this up to, I don't know, 900. Okay, you can see a little bit good. Maybe that's not the best color. What else do we have? Like, we have text, teal, maybe a darker, maybe indigo would work better, or purple. Let's say we do purple 900. I wonder what that looks like. Okay, so now it's a purple 900, and let's make it, I don't know, a bold font. Let's see, we can do font extra bold. What does that look like? Okay, now we have an extra bold font right there, which I think makes it stand out more. So you can see what I'm doing here. It's just really easy to add these utility classes wherever I need to. I mean, just this after like 5-10 minutes, I made a decent looking card. Doesn't look completely ugly, but it's, it works. We could also, instead of text center, maybe do text left right here. Now it's all left aligned. Yeah, so you could do all sorts of things. There's so many utility classes, things like that. This picture right here, we might have, it might be a little not aligned correctly because of the height and width restrictions we put on it. We could do something like this. So where the class is H64, there's object. So I can do object cover. And that might make it kind of position it a little bit better if we think we don't have it positioned correctly. We can even do something like this. Let's say we want it at the top. We want to create another image, and we'll use the unsplash image again. Random. And this time I'm going to use another class here. I want the width, which I can push W to be full, and that'll give it 100% width. Okay. And I'm going to delete the welcome up here. So I just kind of want it near the top. And now you can see here, this width is 100%. Let's make the height a little less. I don't know. Let's do the height of, can I do 1/2? I don't think I can do that. I think I can just do height 48. Okay, that's way too small. 64. Okay, that's the height of 64. Obviously, it's all distorted, so maybe this time we use something like object cover on it. Object, let's see, object cover. Okay, so now it's just cutting it off the top there. Now let's say I wanted to push this card up a little bit at the top right here. So we can do that. So what we can do is we can use negative margins, and that's another class inside here. So this div controls pretty much everything in here. So I can do negative m, which is negative margin. I can do negative, I don't know, 24. And now you can see it pushed it on top of the picture, which is what we wanted. And if we refresh it and we get 2 new pictures, actually they're going to be the same because just the way it works. But now the picture is pushed on top, and this didn't take too much work or effort to create a pretty basic design here, but you know, it works. Cool. So I guess I could show you one other thing. Is we kind of hinted at you can make changes to everything. So if I go to this this Tailwind config, I have this extend right here, and I can add in my own classes or my own margins and things like that it doesn't exist. So one example of that is maybe I want to add a different color. So I'm going to add a color called, let's call it EriK. We're going to color EriK, and we're going to make it some, I don't know, CDBFF. Oops, I have a typo. I need to put S in here. So now I should be able to add EriK. So if I go bg-EriK and save it, cool. Now I got my bluish background for EriK because I added it in there. So you can see you can definitely go through here and just change all the different values that you want. One thing you can do too, if you want to kind of take a look at them all, is you can run npx tailwind init -- full. And what that'll do is it says it already exists, so it won't do it. But if let's say I delete this file, which is fine, I really haven't done anything, and I run this again in the root folder, it creates this tailwind config file, but you can see it now. It has every single value. I'm going to save it. Let's see here. There we go. So it has every single value in the whole template. So I see all the different screen sizes, all the different colors, gray, red, orange, yellow, or green, teal, blue. I can change any of these values that I want, and I can kind of get an idea of how it all works. Of course, I don't recommend doing this because you don't really know what you changed. I rather just have the other file where you can just change one thing at a time. So if I go back here and I delete it, and then I run Tailwind CSS without the -- full, then I just get the normal Tailwind config file, which looks like this, which is good for me. And by the way, since now I got rid of EriK, if I refresh it, it's going to be, actually I have to start the server again. It'll be back to white because the EriK one doesn't work anymore. So I'm going to change this back to gray 200. And you can see here, it's back again. Let's see here. Let's see here. If we go gray, let's do green 300. Okay, now we got a little bit of green background. So one really important feature that I haven't hit on of Tailwind CSS is that it has these. If you look in the documentation and look at this layout container, you have these different screen sizes: small, medium, large, or extra large. And usually the way you can basically do a mobile first layout when you're working with CSS, with Tailwind CSS. So like, for example, you can see here, if I make it to smaller screen size, it looks kind of weird. It just squishes everything together. But what happens if I wanted to, let's say, get rid of this picture up top on smaller screens? So we can do that by going into our home component again. And this is the image in the class. So if we put hid in here, you see here, it just disappears. But I could do it something like this, where maybe on small screens, so you just put SM and you put colon, or you do you can do all different screen sizes. So you either do SM colon, MD, LG, and these are different breakpoints. So let's say it's hidden by default, but when you get to large screens, it turns into block. So now you see it on the large screen, but if we reduce the size, it disappears when we go to that threshold. So if we look here and we start playing around with the size, you see it's 12, 15, 12. Okay, as soon as it gets below this large, 1024, it disappears. So this kind of opens up a bunch of things you can do now, that you can basically do the mobile first layout and then have it change. So you can play around with this and mess around with what you want happening on different sizes by just using this MD or LG and with a colon, and you can do all sorts of fun things. Let's see here. I wonder if I want to do this text right here, this span. Let's say on small screens, I'm going to have the text be purple 900, but on larger medium screens, I want the text to be, I don't know, teal 200. So what happens if we do something like that? So now you see it's teal 200 on these larger screens, but if we get smaller, at a certain point it turns into teal purple 900. So that's just an easy way of changing things around. All right, I think that's all I'm going to cover today. I would love to hear what you guys think of Tailwind. I know we just went through a bunch of different concepts. Let me know in a comment below. I appreciate it. Thanks.